Hey, it's Justin Coletti of SonicScoop. And wouldn't it be kind of cool if you could reach out to some of your favorite producers, mixers, or mastering engineers and say to them, hey, can you give me your favorite analog chain for mixing a vocal? Can you give me your favorite mixing chain for drum bus? Can you send me a whole entire mastering chain and just like plop it down in my studio so I can use it? The closest tool I've found to that so far is ControlHub by STL Tones. That's built around this weird but useful idea of being able to trace an analog signal path or a digital signal path, capture that thing perfectly, and then use it as a starting point for you to mix from. And they've had some really great producers, engineers, and mixers contribute to this. There's names in here like Tom Lord Allergy, mastering engineer Mauer Applebaum's in here, F. Reed Shippen, a lot of great producers and mixers, a whole bunch who I know personally. We got Jeff Giuliano, Urko, Lou Diaz, Jason LaRocco, who's done a tremendous number of film scores, and a whole bunch more. I've been playing around with this thing, and I was a little skeptical of the idea at first, but this thing sounds really good, and it's actually really fun to use. And it actually encourages you to work in a way that's similar to how some of the best mixers out there actually work. If you go into Tom Lord Allergy Studio or Chris Lord Allergy Studio, they're not actually doing what you think they might be doing, which is patching out to some of the fancy hardware around them and then twiddling the knobs. No, a lot of these guys do not do that. A lot of the best mixers who are surrounded by analog gear will actually have compressors that they never touch a single knob on. They just patch into it and say, does it sound better? Are we going in the right direction? Or no? If not, choose something else. If yes, stick with it. Done. And this whole idea of getting analog traces from your favorite mixers, producers, engineers kind of forces you to work in that way. They give you these preset starting points, the same preset starting points they use in their own mixes, in their own work, and then allow you to use them. Now, of course, you often want to tweak further from there once you have a good starting point, which is why ControlHub, in the bottom of it, this whole second half, allows you to tweak things a lot further with individual modules, a pre-EQ, a color module, dynamics module, post-EQ, and actually some really credible sounding effects and a limiter as well. And while all of these sound surprisingly good and are part of the traces that a lot of these producers and engineers have made, what really attracted me to this thing was the idea that I can get great sounding starting points from major producers and engineers using their actual analog hardware. And B, the idea that I can use the tracer inside of ControlHub to steal the analog gear and complete signal paths of anyone I want or at any studio I want. I could theoretically go into any studio in the world with this plugin and use the tracer tool to capture the essence, to suck the soul out of some of the analog gear that's there. And it works not only with analog gear, but you could also replicate digital signal chains with this. And there's a few interesting applications I can think of there as well. Before we get into all that and before we start hearing this thing in action, big shout out and thanks to STL Tones. These guys sent me a license, asked me to check it out and give my honest opinion here on the channel and help them tell the story of what this thing is meant to do and how you might be able to use it. So big thanks to those guys for supporting the channel and giving me this opportunity to explore this thing in more depth. So the pros here of this whole idea of tracing a signal path is you get to get the mojo of that entire signal path. It could be a preamp into an EQ, into a compressor, into a transformer with the color of a real console and a tape machine. But the con to this approach is that once you've done this complete trace, that trace is kind of set in stone. You have the fingerprint of that signal chain with those exact settings. So what if you want to tweak things further? Well, one of the cool things is that there's actually a lot of great producers and engineers who have made a whole bunch of different traces with a whole bunch of different settings. But if you want to go even further and just use these traces as a starting point, which is probably the best way to use them, there's a whole comprehensive channel strip effects section down here, which is surprisingly good in its own right. If you were just to open up ControlHub and not even use the traces and just mess around with these modules here at the bottom, you could get a lot of value out of this thing. In particular, I really like the sound of the color module they have here, which has its own tape and tube saturation that can be added, as well as a dynamic section that has VCA and FET compression. It's got a de-esser built into it and a transient designer. And then it's got EQ, both pre-EQ and post-EQ, as well as a pretty robust effects section and a limiter. And a lot of the traces that have been made by some of the top producers, mixers, and mastering engineers who've contributed to the artist packs for ControlHub, they're utilizing not only just this trace function, but also this whole channel strip section. For instance, my friend Maor Applebaum here has 50 different traces and presets in here that use not only his analog hardware, but also the EQ and compression that's built right into ControlHub. Here's a starting point called bigger subs. So in a lot of these, he's actually using his hardware EQ for a starting point, but then he's making further adjustments with the color, dynamics, and EQ section built into ControlHub that allows you to further refine the sound that you're getting. There's a whole bunch of great audio engineers in here, just a whole ton of really capable people tracing their analog gear and then going in here and refining those traces even further with some of the modules here at the bottom of ControlHub. In just a minute, we'll get to listen to some of the presets that are in here in a mastering context, which is what I do. But I also want to give a shot of making some of my own traces that you can check out. Now, I've been mastering in the box completely digitally since about 2017. Before that, I was really on an analog mastering system at Joe Lambert Mastering. And I kind of want to send this over to my mastering mentor, Joe Lambert, now so he can capture and trace some of my favorite gear that's in his space. But I like the idea that you could adapt this not only in an analog setting, but I could take this and apply it to some of my plugin chains to potentially give some of my clients a starting point. Every once in a while, I'll get the request from people who want me to master their record, but they don't want to pay me to master the entire thing. So they say, hey, Justin, could you just master one of the tracks and then kind of give me some presets that I could work with and tweak from there? And although that's a weird way of working, I've agreed to it in the past. And sometimes I've done it where we're all using the same tool set. So I restrict myself to just mastering using FabFilter plugins, or I just master with only Isotopes Ozone, or I'll only master with stuff in the Plugin Alliance mega subscription so that they can open up my master and tweak from there. It sounds crazy. I don't know if it's something that most mastering engineers would agree to, but I've done it and I totally don't mind. But I'm realizing I could do that even better and even in the digital world with something like ControlHub. For instance, I could take two of my favorite mastering EQs, both in the hardware and software domain, the Maselec MEA2, beautifully recreated here by Relab, and the classic Sontec mastering EQ. These two EQs here are my favorite ones to open up first on just about any master that I do, but I don't expect everyone to have them. But what I can do is create a whole bunch of traces through these plugins, as well as through some of my character compressors, and just create a whole library of starting points that I could potentially use and tweak further, or I could potentially give to other people, and even you to use. And this is one of the other cool things about ControlHub. They have a whole trace exchange where you can swap traces that you do with other people. And I'm going to put some of my traces up there for you to check out. Now, I know to some of you, it might sound a little bit weird, this idea that you could take someone else's EQ settings for a completely different master and put it on your master and have that be a starting point. But the reality is that in every single master that I do, they all fall into one of four basic shapes. Generally speaking, a mix is going to be too dark, too mid-rangey, too bright, or too scooped, not mid-rangey enough. And if you can identify which one of those problems you have in your master and which general direction you want to go in, that's 70 or 80% of mastering right there. Now, of course, you want to fine-tune things further. Exactly what frequencies you cut and boost at and by exactly how much do matter, and they do make a difference. But just making that right diagnosis and decision of, hey, this is the correct direction to go, that's probably the biggest and most important thing when it comes to getting the EQ curve right for a master or for any instrument in pretty much any mix. And one of the things that I like about ControlHub is that it encourages that kind of thinking. I can go in here into one of the artist packs. Since we're talking about mastering, I'll grab Maor Applebaum's mastering pack. And it's like, what are we looking for? What does this thing need? Does it need a high-end lift? Does it need to be wider and louder? Does it need subtle air or weight and snap? Using some of these as a starting point and then tweaking from there is totally a valid way to work. And if you're getting stuck on a sound or on a project, it can kind of totally reframe the way that you're thinking, snap you out of your current approach, and force you to listen freshly and figure out which direction are we actually supposed to go in. And I was surprised to find I actually have ended up using already ControlHub on a master that was approved by the client. There was one artist recently who I sent 3 different versions of the master to. I sent him a fairly flat master that was really close to his original mix, one where I tweaked things in the direction I thought it should be going, and then one more that I based around one of these presets in ControlHub. I'm actually pretty sure it was one of Mark Lewis's. I went in here under Mix, Bus, and Master, and I don't remember which one I picked. I think it might have been Stereo Bus Medium Glue with or without the transformer. I loaded this up, and just going through the trace of his console, compressor, and EQ, it added a new dimensionality to the sound, made me think differently about what direction the master could go, and I tweaked it a little bit here from the EQ, applied an appropriate amount of limiting, and that was it. I had the master. I sent all 3 to the client, and he picked out the one that I had done completely in ControlHub, using someone else's mastering preset as a starting place. And I'm a mastering engineer. So much to my surprise, I'm kind of sold on the idea. I think I'd be even more sold on it if I was a mixing engineer. I'd go over here to Tom Lord Algae, grab one of his vocal presets, one of his bass presets, try a few of them, and throw it right into the middle of my mix and maybe tweak from there. And if that sounds weird to you, you've got to realize that a lot of the best mixing engineers on the planet actually work this way with their own hardware. If you talk to Tom Lord Algae's brother, Chris Lord Algae, he'll tell you the same thing. He has a whole bunch of compressors that he doesn't touch any of the knobs or dials on. You plug into one of the compressors. If it sounds good, great, use it. If it doesn't, you plug into a different one that has different settings that never move. A lot of mixers, when you see them in these big rooms full of gear, some of them never touch the knobs on so much of the gear in the studio. They're just plugging into it and saying, does it sound better? Does it sound like it's in the right direction? If yes, keep it. If not, try something else. And that's the kind of approach that ControlHub encourages. And it allows you to do it with the actual analog hardware chains used by some really top mixers, producers, and engineers. In just a second, we'll hear a couple of quick before and afters. I've got some rock tunes pulled up here, and I've also got some more kind of acoustic-y ballad tunes pulled up, so we get to hear it across a range of material. And I'm also going to try making some of my own traces, which is supremely easy. Really, all you've got to do is click over here under Tracer, tell it whether you're capturing a complete signal chain or just a compressor. And once you've done that, you basically locate and import a special audio file that you're going to run through your signal chain that will allow you to create your trace. So I'll create a few of those using some of my favorite mastering EQs and some of my favorite character compressors and color devices. And if you want to try this out yourself, you can find them on the Trace Exchange. All right, without any more talking for me, let's hear this thing in action on something heavy and on something light. I'll start on the light side with a little bit of a acoustic ballad that a singer-songwriter named Joe Steele sent me to master. This one's a bit of a lullaby he wrote for his child called Close Your Eyes. And just going through some of these presets, you can really hear some of the tone and dimension that's added with some of these analog traces. Here's a before and after with a stereo bus setting from Mark Lewis. It's got a little bit of a Massenburg EQ, SSL bus compressor, and there's some console coloration going on here. Here's what it sounds like without the trace.
Living has a high cost, I'll tell you it's then lost for now. Close your eyes.
Do you hear it tighten up a little bit and just get a little bit richer sounding? We're not listening perfectly level matched here, and that can be a little bit of an issue whenever you're cruising through presets on just about anything. But I think the difference here is fairly clear. It's subtle, but it's really making it feel just a little bit more polished, a little tighter, and adding a little bit more three-dimensionality to the sound. Here's our before again.
And when you're all grown and I'm old, remember all the things you've been told. Till the day I'm pushing daisies, you'll be my baby now. Close your eyes.
To me, that's a great starting place. If we wanted to go a little bit brighter and tighter while not losing some of the personality and richness that's there, while even adding a little bit more, this could be a cool preset to go with. Let's try the same experiment on something a little bit more amped up. Here I've got a track from an artist named Londinium, mixed by one of the band members, a guy named Varun, who did a great job of it. For his, let's go through a few presets here. I'm going to grab Maor Applebaum's presets. He's worked on a lot of heavy music, metal, and hard rock masters, so I've grabbed one here called Wider and Louder. Let's check out this before and after. Here's our before. Definitely delivers as advertised on the name. I think we might want to back off on the threshold a little bit since this mix is already pretty hot, but that's one direction we could go in. And to figure out if it's the right direction, we'll find out pretty fast just by flipping through some other presets. Here's a totally different direction we could take it in. Cool, so a lot of potentially great starting points in there. I think we could get into our mind's ear which direction we think we want to go into, take one spot, kind of loop it, and go through some of these presets and see which one takes us closer to it. And then to refine it further, I'm really loving the sound of this color control over here, as well as a totally capable dynamic section and limiter, but you could even turn all these modules off if you just wanted to get a pure version of the trace alone. But what some of these contributors are doing are providing more than just their trace. It's their trace plus a curated amount of additional color, a little bit of additional post EQ, a little bit of additional limiting, and potentially even a bit of compression, allowing you to further tweak from here. All right, I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at the ControlHub with me. Let me know in the comments down below, have you used this tool? Can you think of additional applications for it that I failed to mention? If you have checked it out, what are some of your favorite artists and presets that are in here? Because I think some of the biggest value in ControlHub is getting the curated traces from specific personalities, people who hear things the way that you want to hear them. Really credible, capable producers, mixers, mastering engineers who can give you a curated list of starting points that you can jump off from. Give it a try, tell them we sent you, have fun with it, and once you have given it a shot, let me know how it's treating you in the comments down below. Thanks again for hanging out with me. This is Justin Coletti of SonicScoop. See you next time.